Hello and welcome to this edition of College Central. I'm Ryan Lavner, and last week we tackled the biggest storylines on the men's side. This week, it's the women's turn. To help me out, once again bringing in my former colleague at Golfweek.com, Lance Ringler. And Lance, let's jump right into it with the first question. What's the team that's impressed you most this fall?
Well, yeah, obviously, Ryan, we're always looking at the big three teams. You know, you have the Dukes, you have the Arizona States, you have the Southern Californias. They've predominantly been the teams you always tend to focus on in college golf. And one of the exciting things this year is there's a couple new teams at the top of the rankings that played really well. You start with South Carolina and the University of Washington. Not that these teams haven't been good in the past. It's just that they've dominated the 1 and 2 spot in the rankings this fall. And so I start right with South Carolina and Washington. They both have 2 wins. Washington's looking for a 3rd win today at the Pac-12 preview. So Washington's likely going to end in the fall with 3 wins. South Carolina obviously won the Annika. 2 really good teams that are going to finish the fall 1-2 in the rankings, and I think they're probably the surprise teams. Even though they're the top teams, they've got to be a little bit surprised to see them at 1 and 2 at the end of the fall season.
Yeah, there's certainly more parity this year. I mean, last year it was really the USC, UCLA, and Duke show. This year, you have to imagine that UCLA, USC, Duke, Stanford, they're all going to be there at the end of the running. But pretty impressive starts for Washington and South Carolina. Lance, on the other side of the coin, a disappointing team. Who's a team that's really failed to live up to your expectations?
You know, it's a little early, Ryan, because a lot of these teams haven't quite played, they've only played 2-3 tournaments. Some teams have played 4, so it's a little early. One team, I think, if we look at what's happened so far, is I would start with Arizona. And only from this standpoint, they finished 2nd at the Annika, which was great. That's not a disappointment. Then they went to the Windy City, finished 4th. But they went to the Landfall, finished tied for 10th. This is a team that we could talk about as a team that could win a national title. They're in that conversation. And to finish tied for 10th definitely was a disappointment. Like I said, it's still a little early. They're probably going to have a really good finish at the Pac-12 preview. So that's one team that may be a little bit disappointing. Another team, maybe Alabama. They started the year with a 10th place and 8th place, then an 11th place. They did rebound well at the Landfall with a 2nd. And the only reason I say Alabama is because they, have been much of the talk in college golf the last couple of years, in women's college golf, that is. And so a little bit of a surprise. They're obviously going through some roster changes. But, if there's 2 teams, like I said, it's still early, but those 2 teams, Arizona and Alabama, you might look at it as a little bit of a disappointment, but certainly enough time for those teams to turn it around.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like the Alabama women's team is retooling just like it is on the men's side. When you look at the men's side, it's so deep individually, a lot of great players. Who's the top individual on the women's game that's really impressed you this fall?
Well, obviously, like I said, a lot's going to play out in the spring season. The fall season, just a little bit of getting your feet wet, seeing where you land. A lot of, the best players may have played in Q school, missed the tournament for the World Team Amateur Championship. So if we look at one player who's jumped out and put themselves in position, you have to start with UNLV's Dana Finkelstein. She came out this year. She has 4 top 10s with 2 victories. Her other finishes outside the victories was a 7th and a 2nd. And a player who made the national championship last year as an individual. And certainly after 4 events this fall, she's put herself definitely in contention to be a first-team All-American. And who knows, maybe she keeps herself in Player of the Year talks as the spring progresses.
It's going to certainly be interesting to see what players like Allison Lee at UCLA, Annie Park at USC are going to do when it comes to Q school. You could see a major shakeup at the top of the women's game. But Lance, thank you for joining us, and thank you at home for watching this edition of College Central. Be sure to keep it locked right here on golfchannel.com/College Central for more news and notes. We'll see you next time.